What's up, Colorado, CannaTopia? I can still hear the music. I hope you guys are having a wonderful, wonderful evening. We've got an awesome guest tonight. Just want to do a real quick check, make sure you guys can hear us. I got the music pretty low, so should be good. I still hear it. Wow. You're going to hear it loud because it's on the computer. Your computer volume is way different than that. So they should. All right. I don't know anything about tech stuff, so they should be good. We've got an awesome guest tonight. I just kind of a quick introduction before we bring him on. As you guys know, I help a lot of people in kind of across the United States, and they're just their little homegrowns. But I also know a few people in other countries. And I had run across this gentleman, I believe he was in South Africa somewhere, and he was asking me if I knew of anything that was capable of doing well and finishing outside in South Africa. I have never been there. I don't know of anything other than like what might already be in his country. So I reached out to one of my Gangier instructors and just asked him, I said, hey, do you know, you've been in this a while. Do you know anybody, that's been doing this a while that might have some kind of recommendation on something? And the first person he sent me was this gentleman, Dave Scott. Okay. He's like, hit Dave Scott up, dude. This cat, if he doesn't have it, he knows where somebody is. He knows a lot about this stuff. It was like genetics on that end. I was like, okay. He's like, he's your guy. So I reach out to him on Facebook, and I'm like, hey, Dave, I hit Kevin up. He asked me, I asked him a couple things. He said you were the guy to talk to. Do you happen to have anything that, my guy can pick up? So I started getting into this big conversation about kind of where Dave was at. And when I had initially hit him up, he was in the process of moving. Dave's not here, man. Yeah, Dave's not here, man. He was in the process of moving down and I relocating, and I kind of want to get into some of this if he's comfortable. But he moved down into Jamaica, and really just kind of when I started following his Facebook, it was just exploded with stuff that I didn't think people were still doing that. Like, I didn't think people were going like back to some like older seed stock type stuff and really like trying to rework line, bring back stuff like he's got a haze from scratch project that's absolutely I'm super kind of stoked about a lot of stuff. So I want him to get into this. His name's Dave Scott, and the guy is I consider him legendary. He's spent time with Neville Hayes, which that guy he's responsible for a lot of genetics. Guys. We would not be where we're at in that world without guys like that. So to have somebody from that, I don't want to say era because I don't want to make him feel old, but dude, he really is a foundation layer. Like he really put it down for guys like us to do what we do. So I want to show a lot of love and bring on Dave Scott, introduce you two guys to him, and let him tell us a little bit about himself.
This is a guy you should probably have on Legends of Legacy.
For sure.
All right, let's get him up here. Hold on, guys. All right.
All right, Dave, can you hear me? Uh, awesome. I'm doing really, really good. Um, I'm super excited to have you on here, man. You really are. When we started talking and you kind of started going into what you do and how long you've been doing it, and some of the people you've, not just the people, but some of the stuff you've come across, you really are one of the people that has laid down that foundation for, got people like me and James and home growers across. We wouldn't have a lot of the varieties that we have if it wasn't for folks that really put in the work. And I feel like you continue to do that. You have like a haze from scratch that you're working on, and uh, yeah. Mm, really? Ah, yep. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Makes
Ah,
sense.
So that's a question a lot of people actually ask me, and I mean, you said it. Nobody really breeds or selects for males, and somebody asked me, they're like, "Well, how do you choose a male?" I was like, "From the only way I know how to do it is you pick a male and you hit it onto a bunch of different varieties and see what it passes along." Hmm. Right. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah.
Wow.
We always bite off more than we can chew when we like it. Ooh. Oh, okay. Yeah. Wow. You're right. Okay. Yes. Oh, I can still
Wow.
Really kind of amazing,
Yeah.
yeah, it's been really really interesting. I hit the jackpot on actually an old
Can you
blueberry
hear him
cross.
now, Aaron?
Okay,
Yeah, can you
go.
hear me? Can you hear
Yeah,
me,
we
guys?
can hear some of our guests, I guess, are having a hard time hearing you.
Okay, let me see if I can move my computer a little. Um, Yeah, so we've been really focusing on just going through heirlooms and creating F1 hybrids, and investigating, what kind of profiles that we're getting from them, and stuff that hasn't been worked, to any great degree in decades.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, like I'm doing a project with Raga, which is the Rastafarian church here in Jamaica. And they gave me a really old true lamb's bread cutting. That term is thrown around so much. And the lamb's bread is nearly extinct on this island. Altogether, I've spent years on the island before when I had the first commercial license. And now I've been back here for almost a year. And now that I'm, communicating directly and really well connected in the Rasta community, I'm realizing that the true old school genetics are almost extinct here. And
Really?
so, yeah, so they gave me a cutting, and guys, it's super long flowering plant. I mean, it's making A5 and C5 seem like they're 6 weekers. Um,
Wow.
yeah, it's really something, and it's super inbred, but it's actually a cutting that came from the Maroons from indigenous village. And really, they said that plant is nearly extinct. I know two people on the island that have, a true representation of that old plant, and it's both in cutting form. That's how rare it is.
Wow.
Yeah, so so that's a pretty big one for me. I actually looked at the plants this morning, and I said, guys, we just produced an F1 to that clone, and I looked at we planted about 40 of them, and I said to the guys, when we take that F1 and put it back on these, we're like 2/3 the way of preserving a strain that has been here since it came with the African slaves in bondage,
Yeah.
that's nearly extinct, and I've been honored to bring it back, right? Like that's a
Yeah.
huge honor. And we're almost there. So I outcrossed it with an African. We just made an F1 with an African male back to the lambs, and now we're going to take that F1 and back cross it back to the clone, and then work it from there.
Oh,
It's
wow.
so inbred, and like it's one of the more inbred sativas I've ever seen, because you rarely see, the type of classic bottlenecking in a pure equatorial sativa. And so when you see it, you know that plant has been like really inbred. But what happened in Jamaica was, in the 70s, the first Afghan seeds were brought here, and in the 80s, with immigration from India, a lot of North Indian genetics were brought here, and with the pressure from prohibition, the helicopters flying, the sprays, and the fact that the true old school lamb's bread only basically produced about 2 harvests per year, and the plants would be 6 feet tall. Um, the pressure of prohibition just made it extinct,
Yeah.
and like a lot of the world. But in Jamaica, there's so many things. Tourists come here and they get a hybrid, and they call it lamb's bread, but really those genetics are almost gone here. And so what I'm doing is I'm producing, that inbred line, and then the different churches of the organization are called mansions, and I want to give 1,000 seeds back to every mansion of Braga,
That's awesome.
because they could consider that a sacramental plant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a project that I'm really enjoying working on, and it's not really one, for anything but straight preservation.
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think a lot of people think that they want to grow that type of a plant, but unless they're really mature in their cultivation skills, and have a fair bit of experience, I think it might be a more difficult plant for people in non-tropical environments to really tackle.
What is
Um,
it that makes lamb's bread so special?
when I got here, the other guy who has the clone, Haru, gave me about 35 grams of it, and I know that because it's only harvest twice a year, it was a pretty awesome gift. And what's special about it is it has this introspective upper frequency high that, unlike a Thai or even certain Africans like a Malawi, had those racing edginess.
Yes.
The lamb's bread has this upper frequency with zero body to it, but it's really introspective and dreamy. Yet it has no body load at all. And when you think about, people working in this heat and in this environment, that type of plant really fits in.
Yeah.
But I would say that it's a spiritual type of cannabis, and
Beautiful.
I mean that's why the Rastas use it they consider it a sacramental, plant that's used in their church. It's the project I'm calling here, or that I'm doing here, we're calling it Exodus, because I
Beautiful.
think that plant moved with Jaws people.
Oh, 100%. And that's,
Yeah.
I think that makes that project even that much more special. When you're talking about something like you said earlier, this is like a sacrament. This is very much a sacrament to them. And when you're talking about something where it's very specific in the effects, that becomes a sacrament and it's almost gone. And they came to you to say, you know what, can you preserve this for us in order to, so we can maintain this for generations and generations and generations? Because when you're to a point where it's stuck, it it ends up like skunk here did in the States. When you're looking at what prohibition is forcing people to do with their cultivation, with how they carry everything, how
Yeah,
they
I call that the
possibly sell it.
prohibition model, guys, and all of our
Yeah.
contemporary genetics were built around a prohibition model.
Yep.
And so really our selections, our tastes, our education, everything from my generation, when I first started selling seeds in the mid 90s, people wanted 7 weeks, and 9 weeks they were hemming and hawing, and they didn't care about the potency really. They wanted it to be potent. They wanted it to be quote BC bud, right?
Yeah.
But I used to call it bimbos, tits, ass, and no personality.
Right.
They cared about what it looked like, and how, and almost more what it looked like than even how it smelled in a lot of cases.
Oh, it was all about bag appeal. 100%.
Yeah, all about. But from the producer's perspective, it was bag appeal and how many days to market. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like we're talking about pork bellies or something. But
100%.
but that's how it was. And what we're seeing now is we're seeing like the genetics that I'm producing now. There was very little interest in them when I first started preserving them. When I won the Cannabis Cup, the main event in 2005 with Willie Nelson, nobody could believe that I smashed the Cannabis Cup, first place, best overall strain, with an F1 between two land races or heirlooms, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And sort of that word landrace wasn't even really used much back then. We really pushed that nomenclature in our ads, and it sort of developed, over the last 15 years or so, really into the common use that it is today.
Yeah.
But the prohibition model, I mean, I don't even know how many strains are lost because of it. Mexico's the same way, man. There's guys, and I mean no disrespect to them, but there's guys showing off what they're calling, original Mexican genetics, which I do have some that I've kept for 30 years, and a
Yeah.
lot of it's really like very different than the Mexican genetics that I grew up smoking. Like there's a lot of really wide leaf drug types and stuff, being shown as sort of heirloom Mexican.
Get out of here.
And but what happened in Mexico is the same thing that happened in Jamaica. Mexico had a lot of outstanding old school genetics, but Mexico was one of the first ones to get rid of them. And Mexico was so controlled by certain groups that had the buying power, that those seeds were really really wiped out quite aggressively in Mexico, because obviously the farmer doesn't want to grow something that the buyer is not going to appreciate.
Yeah.
But I've seen this throughout the world. And in 2019, I was over in Southeast Asia for 6 months, and I hadn't been back there since about 1990. And the same thing there. I saw all these. I would estimate like skunk and even some blueberry hybrids in the bushes of Thailand.
Mhm.
And until I got out to like rural Cambodia around Kampot and into like Luang Prabang and Laos and stuff, I didn't see the old genetics that were all around back in the 90s. at the early, the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that right now is a time with this sort of movement towards a consciousness of preservation that we probably can save a lot of the things, but ultimately the reality is that a lot of them are forever lost.
Lost.
And
Well, and
and
I think the skunk is one. It's really, I think it's the one that's on everybody's mind. We talk about it on the podcast. It comes up in our comment section all the
guys,
time. Like, and I
I
saw
just
your
made a
post the
comment.
other
Yeah.
day about like, yep, another roadkill skunk that's not roadkill skunk, and
Yeah.
it's the epitome of everybody's life, and everybody's got one, but
So I'm
nobody
old
can
enough to
actually produce.
remember the skunk.
Right.
And it wasn't called roadkill skunk. I didn't even hear roadkill skunk until like 2005 or something.
Yep.
So it was just skunk.
Yep.
And it was bright green flower, like really like bright green flower. At least the BC version. And I mean, it didn't smell like rubber. Guys keep on saying, "Oh, it's a burnt rubber phenol." I'm like, "No, man. It didn't smell like burnt rubber. It didn't smell like anything. It smelled like a fucking skunk sprayed you."
Yep.
And it was unmistakable. My mother and my mother-in-law would say, "What the fuck's going on? Is there a skunk in the yard?"
Yep.
It was truly a skunk spray type plant. And what happened in the British Columbia scene is by like about 1990 and 91, Hawaiian started showing up, a Hawaiian clone, probably Hawaiian indica, like from Holland.
Yeah.
And the UBC chemo moved in. And that skunk was getting guys busted. And back then, we didn't have ozone generators yet, right? And we didn't have carbon filters yet.
Nope.
So we had Ona discs, which are like giant urinal blocks.
Yeah, no, it's funny. They still sell them. They're like, oh, own a gel. It still works. And if you got a small closet grow, it does. But yeah.
But we didn't have that stuff. And so I saw the skunk come and go. And as a grower, I could access the clone, but I didn't want to grow it. And it wasn't about the smell for me. It was because the smoke was rough compared to the Hawaiian and UBC chemo that we had at the time. Like it was just a rougher kind of smoke, it stunk
Yep.
heavily, and it like gave you real red eyes.
Yep.
It was one of those kind of strains, and it stunk. And in the market, everybody saw the more impressive big buds of the Hawaiian produced huge buds as Hawaiian indica strain, and the UBC chemo was just super potent for its time, right? And so we just saw a lack of interest and a fear of growers. So I just watched it, and nobody asked about it. That's the thing. All through the 90s, 98, 99, nobody asked about it. It's only all of a sudden right now that there's this, like, not right now, say the last 8 years, right?
Yeah.
There's been this resurgence in interest. And I had a strain that came to me through a guy, Hashmaster Cut, he's known online. And it smelled like it when it was growing. I got all excited. And as soon as I dried it, it didn't have it anymore.
Yeah.
So, and I've been down all these roads. Somebody who I really respect sent me this latest one that I grew, and I got all excited, and I actually went out into a field, and I missed the assessing it, because I would have potentially wanted to take a cutting or breed with it, but I walked up and I smelled it, and I looked at Garnet, my partner, and I'm like, nah, it's got absolutely no attributes of skunk whatsoever, right?
So, aside from like a nostalgia point, like at a point now where like specific growers in the market would be in a demand for seed of it, and there are a few people who say they want it, but I don't know, like, have they truly experienced that skunk, that super offensive, like you got sprayed with a skunk? Do you want to taste that and smell that? Like, aside from that nostalgia piece, would you really see a reality in trying to put effort in potentially bringing that back if it was possible?
You know what? I've had some different guys, and because so many guys have sent me stuff. Guys, we're talking probably at least 8 strains have been sent to me as it's the real deal. It's a real deal. And I've grown them, and here's another one that came from somebody again who I really respect. No offense to them, but it's at the point now where, yeah, I don't really know. me and Dave Watson, Sam the Skunkman are friends, and we've had this discussion in Holland years ago. And there's all this confusion as well that he bred the skunk out of skunk or something. And just to make it clear, skunk number one has nothing to do with that plant. I think that plant that we're talking about, that we call roadkill in fond memory, I
Yeah.
think that it was an import from Pakistan or Afghanistan.
I've said the same thing for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was just because there was loads of products. Some of our BC bud actually came from before the Russian invasion in '79. There was guys who were importing hash loads onto the west coast of Vancouver Island, and from about '76 until the end, they actually brought weed in some of those loads because nobody had seen like the big buds that they were able to get from their hash makers. And my friend Julian, who was like heavily involved in actually in the country, he told me that people had only seen like Mexican, Thai, Colombian, and so when they were doing the loads, they could literally get these lightly seeded flowers for about 10% of the kilo of hash per kilo of flour. And they had this extra space because there was a maximum amount they could put in their containers. And so they were actually bringing flour, and it was marketed in BC and all along the West Coast. And I believe Skunkman said that he heard about the same thing on the West Coast. And this was a bike organization that was bringing that stuff in. Um, but yeah, they marketed it as donkey dick and monkey tails back in the day because nobody had seen those big colas.
Oh, and I heard of that stuff before.
Yeah, so that was where those names came from.
Oh, we lost him.
Oh no. What happened?
I don't know. We lost him. He just let me check see. Oh, got him back on.
Oh.
Hey, I lost you for a second.
Yeah, I was just about to message you. I was like, oh crap, what happened?
But
We're back.
So our king strain, which is the mother of Pink Kush. Pink Kush is probably my best known work.
Yeah.
And Pink Kush in Canada is like honestly like OG in the States. It's I didn't really anticipate the run of popularity that Pink Kush maintained for so many years.
Dude,
Canada.
it was huge. So there was a point, and in like just the western slope of Colorado where that's all anybody wanted.
Yeah.
There were dispensaries selling
Yeah.
Pink Kush with lab tests of like 35-36%.
Yeah,
It
well,
was-
I'm the breeder, guys, and the highest I ever got was 30.2.
Yep.
I'm just being honest. That's the
Yep.
highest test I have ever got. Yeah.
Yep. Which is still very impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do have to say, like, the popularity of Pink Kush is, I think it's still, people still like,
It's kind of nostalgia.
dude, they go nuts. Like, I've got a couple from a buddy, Daniel Knowles, who I don't know where he got his version from, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel Knowles, that sounds familiar. I know Daniel Knowles. He got it from me. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, Knowles Family Farm.
That's a Facebook. That name sounds. I could be wrong, but
Yeah.
that name sounds really familiar to me.
Yeah. He's an older dude out of Oregon originally. He's so nice, dude. I love Daniel Knowles so much.
So guys, right now I just did the work. So King is the parent, the mother, and that plant is really interesting because it goes back to the 80s on Vancouver Island, and I inherited it from the guy who I mentioned that was bringing those loads in. Yeah, and so the King was actually named after a motorcycle club that patched over to another major West Coast name. I'm not going to say. I just don't want to.
Yeah.
But they were called that old club was called the King's Crew. Thus, the name of the strain was the King.
Okay.
So the King had a run, but it was hard to access, and so I ended up getting in trouble when I was a bit younger, over cannabis, and I was on house arrest, and so I ended up getting a job running grow stores while I was on house arrest.
Yeah.
And I ran stores for those guys, and at the end of my working with them, the gentleman, I don't mind saying his name, Julian, actually gave me two of the Kings, the pink and the purple, and 3 of the hash plants. And those dated all the way back to the loads that came in. And those guys were some of the first major commercial growers in Western Canada. And the guy who actually gave them to me isn't a biker. He's actually a little old hippie. He's probably dead now because he would have been older than me when he gave me those cuts, and he was kind of at the end of it. But the guys that I worked with, that he worked with for years, gave me the nod, and that's why Pink Kush exists. But the genetics behind that, it drives me crazy when people say it's an OG variant. I just actually showed that Kevin Jodry, like, here's the basis of it, and it has nothing to do with OG. It's a landrace Pakistani plant that was brought into Canada and bred and selected by a really intelligent man, who's actually an American that was a trust fund kid originally, and to avoid the draft and stuff, his parents moved him to Vancouver Island.
Yeah. Okay.
And then he ended up being very intelligent. His family actually worked in horticulture, cut flowers, lettuce, like greenhouse production.
Mm-hmm.
And so he ended up hooking up with those guys and going over there and actually doing some work with them because he was more knowledgeable than them coming from California.
Yeah.
So really, this is like a mentorship kind of relationship where I inherited those genetics, and so I can't take credit for the king. That credit belongs to a man named Julian Lee. And yeah, he did all the pre-selection, and to this day, I have the King BX3. The clone basically died off in about 2011 or so. It just So basically, when a clone hits 35 years, it's kind of done.
Okay, yeah.
But the King BX3, so I did it's a BX3 open pollination because I wanted to open pollinate it. Basically, that means all phenos from at least a group of about 25 plants, males, females, because I wanted to assess on whether or not the story held true about it, where it came from. And yeah, man, I outcrossed it with a black seed cross Pakistani, another one, because it had the most similar smell to the strain, right? So I outcrossed it with that years ago, and we got total homogeneity in the open pollination. We got pheno 1 and 3, we call it, and basically the difference is one's multi-branching and one's a pole.
Yep.
And we got everywhere from gas, like old school gas though, man, and to the earthiest, cushiest flavors out of the BX3. So what I've done is, because King back in the day when I bred Pink Kush was a clone only, I hadn't got this work done. And so what I've done most recently is I've taken the King BX3 males and back crossed them to the Pink Kush. So there's a whole new level of pink lines coming out, and we also have the Pink Candy and a bunch of other ones I've been working on.
Oh, that's awesome. So real quick, I know you just recently launched, I want to say like in the last 6 months or so, maybe year, you've just launched your seed website, correct?
Yeah, so I co-founded a company years ago that went public last year called Franchise Cannabis Corp. And so I've been working all over the world. That's how I got to Jamaica and had the first commercial farm here. It's how I got to Colombia and worked all over. But after the IPO, I'm a free agent again. And so I'm able to, under my contract, I wasn't allowed to sell seeds. So yeah, I'm a free agent. All the work that I did under that LP and the various countries, I worked in Uruguay, Colombia, St. Vincent, Portugal, Denmark. So all that various work though is in my hands. And so yeah, it's the first website that I've had since about 2008 or so. I've just been hooking up the odd person on Facebook, and I've been teasing people with field pictures for the last 8 years or so.
Yeah.
But and COAs and all kinds of stuff. But all that work was the first time too for the last 8 years. It was all bred by COAs. I had in-house HPLCs. I was quite spoiled for a period of time. So my work kind of took a turn to the next level when I was able to access and understand the use of technology.
Right.
Which I did a fine job intuitively breeding. But nonetheless, the technology certainly made me able to bring things to the next level, particularly around some of the hazes and stuff, because it was such a big sift, and I probably would have never been able to do that level of working, and sifting through plants if I didn't have a corporate sponsorship. So
100%.
yeah, so really now I here I have all my genetics back in my lap, and yeah, so we launched the site, came back to Jamaica, and I've been working on my own with my good friend who was my first employee in Jamaica, Garnet Edwards. He's just a stellar guy, and he's a Rasta.
So,
Um, and another good friend of mine that I've met here, who's one of the founders of the Raga, the Rastafarian Church, Baya, and another Rasta Bob. Like basically, without these guys, I wouldn't be anywhere in this country or wouldn't be able to do this project. So I owe a lot of different people, a lot
yeah.
of respect, including again Dave Watson. Man, that guy was a true mentor to me and really always had my best interest at heart, even when I didn't listen to him. Um, so, again, that's one of the guys that it's been bothering me recently because I've read all kinds of disparaging shit on the internet about one of the most like great people that I know in cannabis.
I
So
wouldn't. It's hard because I've kind of read a lot of stuff like that online too, and honestly, you almost can't even pay attention to it because people who are trying to make a name for themselves that don't have any real legwork to stand on typically will try and destroy the pillars of people who have actually put in the work. And it's really, really humbling and refreshing to even meet what I would consider an OG, to still being like paying homage to, I wouldn't be here without this.
Yeah.
This wouldn't be here without them. And I think in cannabis culture, we've started to lose that at least here in the States, as we've become more open with it and relaxed. It's become kind of this weird ego clash. And I remember even as a kid, it was something that drew me to cannabis was how humble and like cool that community was with everybody I met in cannabis.
Well, my mind directly goes to Frenchie because I feel like the collaboration would just generate a lot of different, unique.
Franchi, you mean the hash guy?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Frenchie cannoli.
Yeah, man. You know something? I said something totally like from the best place, just making a joke on his website, and he took it the wrong way. And
Oh,
and yeah, man. And the last, so I apologized to him and I explained what I said. Basically, I said bud fondling. Like I was complaining about somebody being a bud fondler, that they should join Bud Fondlers Anonymous because they are constantly going in my fields and rubbing my plants.
yeah,
And I made this joke, and he took offense to it.
yeah.
And that was the joke, man. It was about somebody, you know what I'm talking about? Those guys that, and then you watch them walking around with their hash on their hands, sniffing it.
Oh, dude, yeah.
Anyways, I said something to him, and it was just sad because really the last time that I had any conversation with him was a little bit on the negative side, and it was from such an innocent place. But his wife and me talked right after he died,
Yeah.
and she said, "Oh man, he was grumpy sometimes. Don't even sweat it, man."
It's funny because like there was a time where I latched on to Frenchie probably early 2010. I was like super into hash making and I had noticed a couple features of some of his work and I just went like nuts. And over a period of time, I noticed he had like Facebook profile, Instagram, and I started like messaging and asking him questions and he was pretty open. I met him at a hash expo, and then like felt more comfortable to kind of talk to him more. And there was a time where I was trying to like determine where he was at with his like determination and rightness compared to somebody who smokes flower and the way that most people will go at a plant with a scope. And he was having a hard time, I think, getting like selecting the right word to explain. we got in a little bit of an argument, and it was kind of funny. And finally, it just like clicked. I was like, "Oh, gotcha!" Finally, he was like, "Okay, good." I go, "Shit, I pissed off Frenchie."
Yeah, man,
Shit.
I love making hash too, and this particular project, I have all this material that I have to process right now. But I'm a dry sifter, right? That's my real
Yeah.
passion is dry sifting, and I've done some commercial dry sifting of quality, and I really have a passion for dry sift. But everything I've got to run right now is bubble, and I'm a little bit more burnt out than usual, and I my kids and stuff and my partner Garnet, they all have a sense of humor with me right now, because I'm kind of that grumpy old prick sometimes, right? And my also my daughters, they work their butts off on this project every day, man.
Beautiful.
So it truly is a family farm. Um, but yeah, but I digress here. What was I getting? Oh, on hash.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've got a bunch of bubble I have to run here, but I'll make bubble, but it's not really where my passion lies.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember being amazed when the bubble bag first came out and stuff. But once you really get into the nuances of the finer side of dry sifting, it's really hard to really, um,
So
yeah.
it's hard to match, and so after going through the Gangier program with from Kevin Jodry and really like honing in the ability to like focus in on like you were saying subtle nuances. When I started comparing like aged dry sift to aged water, there was a significant, even in the same like from the same plant, it's a significant difference in the terpene profiles from top to bottom, and the effect is so much different. Like, and there is like it takes such a unique experience. Like, you have to be so in tune with your environment and your plants, and you have to know your screens and the heads in order to really achieve quality dry sift. It's not as easy as it looks.
Yeah, that's why even when I did the project in the Middle East, we'll just say the Middle East,
Yeah.
that's why I actually my burning bush strain was a cross between the Sinai, and my love potion. And the reason why I wanted that was partially because the people I was working with really loved the dry sift from Love Potion, but also because I knew what to expect from from the Love Potion as a sift. But I needed the resistances and drought tolerance of that other plant. So I literally bred the burning bush plant for that project, and a lot of those characteristics actually carried through in that hybrid. And we produced a lot of quality dry sift on a fairly commercial scale, and the quality of it was much higher than than you might expect, or that I expected by far. Yeah, so it does come down a lot to the genetics, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
gonna have you come back on, and we're gonna have to do a whole show on dry sift, bro.
Yeah,
Uh,
it'll be great. I like dry sift myself.
I would love to hear your methodology, because I don't know. I've become obsessed with hash production in general because
Hmm.
of the like what it is. You, whether it's dry sift or water sift or even rosin, like, you can preserve the plant much. You can preserve all that goodness much longer, and it changes so much more.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, for me, I'm running through entire plants. I'm de-seeding them, and
Yep.
then that's why I'm running water right now,
Yep.
because a lot of the heads are broken, and not necessarily broken, but the you know what I mean. The plant material is a bit rough,
Yeah.
um, and a lot of it's powdery because we use seed blowers. So we take the plants seeded, we dry them bone dry,
Yep.
and then we basically crush them into tubs, and then we run them through seed blowers that blow away any light seeds. The shake, everything gets collected back into a vessel, and then so basically we get the seeds out, and the whole plant extract goes into the bubble bags. So we
Okay.
actually end up with some really beautiful hash. Um,
Yeah.
but with dry sifting, sometimes that can be less than perfect.
Oh yeah,
Um,
because you're getting so much plant contaminant from all that
exactly,
breaking down. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. The
Yeah,
water gives you that second medium in order to be able to separate what heads are still attached to all of that from the
yeah,
plant material. And then you can go through the bag and you get your like much more controlled sifting. And I've
exactly.
talked,
So that's why I didn't even bother bringing any sifting material here. But we got a lot of bubble to run, boys. It's probably going to be some beautiful, beautiful bubble, I'm sure. But it's kind of exciting too because we're able to run exotics like Colombian black and Santa Marta Colombian gold. This shit that probably nobody's ever bubbled before, right?
yeah.
Uh, so we'll have to
Well,
see. I'll post some pictures and see if we get some melty stuff.
see, and I'm gonna have to hit your site and just kind of cop a bunch of stuff because I'm always looking for stuff like that where it's just like, okay, what has nobody really played with? Or if they have, they haven't, like, nobody's played with it in the last 10 or 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know what Kevin Jodry was really shocked about? He shows up on my farm and I told him, man, the Acapulco Gold, which is one of my favorite old heirlooms, I said
Uh-huh.
it just popped a green apple pheno. And he looked
Ooh.
at me and he says, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Green apple's rare. I don't even know if I've ever smelled." And he went online and he described it as a melted Jolly Rancher.
Yes.
Yeah.
um, yeah, so
Oh,
the Acapulco Gold is one that I've kept for years. You know, I got pictures of it like probably 23 or 24 years ago, and
wow.
it's the same seed line. But I look at it now, and just through selection, how much better the flower to leaf ratio has got. And
Oh,
so I'm
yeah.
able to look at these old pictures and realize, holy cow, man,
They've
we
come a
our
long way.
selection process really made a huge deal.
Ooh,
And
beautiful.
same with the Santa Marta Colombian gold. We got some seeds from research at the University of Magdalena Santa Marta. We were doing research on like the history of cannabis genetics in Santa Marta,
Uh-huh.
and we grew those seeds next to our polished heirloom, which didn't come to me directly from Colombia. It came from a collector in New Mexico, and we're talking like way back in the overgrown cannabis world days. Having already spent time in Colombia, I knew it was authentic, but to get these certified seeds from researchers at the University of Magdalena, the terpene profile is identical. But ours had way, way, way more high uh, trichomatic development. You know, just ours are caked.
Yeah.
And the ones that you could see that came out of the populations of the university were just they were more landrace than heirloom. And
Right.
yeah, yeah, but it's been interesting. We've grown out so much stuff. Some of my old stuff, accidental haze, which I changed the name to cedar plank haze because I thought that accidental might like scare people away. but
Yeah, for real.
but but it was an accidental haze, and the reason we called it accidental haze is it wasn't that the cross was accidental; it's that we didn't expect it to smell like a haze. And that was the
Okay.
first time I ever came up with the idea or the concept of breeding haze types from heirlooms, right? And that's a Colombian red cross a Mexican red hair plant, the old ugly red hair that we
Yeah.
were forced to smoke as kids all the time.
Yep.
Yeah,
Kind of
those
loose, just nothing but hairs.
yeah red
Y-
hairs.
Yep.
Yeah. But that when I cross that and the Colombian red and you grow it under great circumstances, it actually is a pretty amazing plant. And it actually this time we did a fair bit of work on it, and it actually smells like cedar, man, like cedar planks. It starts as like cedar, like the bedding for a hamster cage or something,
Yeah.
but it ends with strong pine. It's really
Yeah.
interesting.
So
Yeah.
it's crazy you bring that up because I know like a lot of especially with heirlooms specifically, a lot of the time where where they've kind of come from is really where you get like the best expression out of that cultivar. And
Hmm.
there's certain ones around here, and we're over here in Colorado on the western slope. It's a high elevation desert, and we're backed right up to the monument. And there's a lot of cultivars that people grow outdoors where you get a cedar pine back on just about everything. If they grew it full
Interesting.
sun, there's cedar pine somewhere in their profile. I've found it on like chocolate and cherry varieties and orange varieties. It's so weird how, and I've not found that in anything. I've never found like a cedar pine like influence show up on a lot of varieties. So I'd be really interested to see like what happens here with something like that.
Yeah, we should actually get you guys some of that to grow there. You know, it's not because of years of selection. I first selected that strain out like probably 2005 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably been inbred like 6 generations. But it's not a terribly long flowering. That Mexican red hair plant was actually fairly quick. Like compared to other Mexicans, say to an Acapulco Gold or something. I think
Yeah.
that's why it was so heavily grown, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but even those eras of Mexico, a lot of the heirlooms are already on their way out. The Mexicans were some of the first ones to really, really, bring in commercialized genetics on a bigger scale. So that's kind of sad because Mexico keeps on my mind because I think that some of my favorite strains in my collection are from there,
Yeah.
and I think it's where we've had the greatest losses.
I could see that.
Yeah,
I could see
yeah. I
that.
think that if we could have went to Mexico, say in 1950, I think the diversity of ganja there would have been like absolutely stunning. Um,
Well, and
just
I
sort of.
think, I think, even in like, if things had gone different with cannabis, yeah, say we get down into Mexico in the 50s, and maybe prohibition never takes hold in the United States, what could be produced in you know Texas and Southern California on the way
Oh
up?
wow.
You'd really have like a more diverse population.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, with you moving in so many different locations or being in so many different locations in the past, have you been able to diversify your lineages that way?
Um, I, diversify which guys?
Well, through moving through different locations, like you've been
Oh,
talking about.
environmental phenotypical expression?
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, it's interesting on this grow, I'm growing Memories of Afghanistan, which is it's literally a four-way hybrid of all the best Afghans that have come in my hand. Um, and I just literally made a poly hybrid of genetically related Afghans, if you want, right?
Yes.
But usually we get expressions in there that are some of the biggest leaves you'll ever see. And I
Oh
grew the
yeah.
exact same seeds on Salt Spring Island, BC in 2020. And I got literally like bigger than dinner plate Afghan leaves. And those
Wow.
same seeds grown here, nah. I almost have a hybrid type expression, and it's literally the same seeds from the same plants.
See, I'd be
Um,
curious to how those do out here because our climate is much closer to like the Afghan Pakistan, like Afghanis, Bubbas, those crush out here.
High altitude desert.
Yeah.
nice. Yeah, that's basically you're talking about Afghanistan. My son was actually there a fair bit. He's a photographer and a journalist. Um, and yeah, he spent a lot of time. He's been all through that region. I've been to Pakistan myself, but my son's been through Pakistan, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan. Like he's been through the entire region.
Oh
Yeah.
wow.
And yeah, he's told me about the intense climatic changes too, in different regions, how drastically it changes there.
So
Um,
is there anything like for anybody who's kind of looking for something that will do well up here? I'd say at least in the Colorado Midwest area. So we're looking at
oh,
like
guys, the
yeah.
King, and the Pink Kush lines, which King is Pink's mom, and the new Pink lines, which are just back crossed to the King BX3s, they'll thrive there. The Memories of Afghanistan's, MOA hybrids. We also have some different OGs, and like I've got OG Sour, which you guys are full of that stuff. So I'm not going to talk to you about the stuff that came from there. But the King family, all the new pink lines, there's so many in the collection. The MOAs, yeah,
I got
there's
I
yeah.
got a guy asking about something that'll do well in the deep South Louisiana.
Oh man, lots. My love potion, my pure love. The pure love is started as an LP1, but through like 11 generations of selection, I selected it towards all sativa phenotypes.
Mm.
Um, and I actually ran the WLD phenotypes differently than I did the sativa phenotypes. And so pure love is literally just sativa-ized love potion through mass selection. It's just selecting the ones from my head that aren't necessarily the most commercially viable ones, but that had the best, the best sativa highs. And so
Yes.
we have the pure love, but I made a ton of hybrids between like Acapulco Gold Colombian Black, Acapulco Gold Santa Marta Colombian Gold. We call that 24 karat gold. We just made a whole bunch of different landrace based or heirloom based F1 hybrids to get out there into people's hands and let them actually experience some of these genetics. I think that a lot of people who are growing for flower, they really want to grow an F1. People are always, asking me why I push that. And I think that, a lot of people think that they want to grow an heirloom and an inbred line until they do. So the reason that I make a lot of these F1 hybrids between two heirlooms is to get that hybrid vigor
Yep.
and also to get the potency a little elevated because some of my plants are getting into 12, 13 generations of inbreeding, right?
Yeah.
And so where they really shine is in those F1s of those two inbred lines.
Yep.
And again, you're talking about a true F1 of two inbred lines. It's not a polyhybrid. So they're true F1s, which are also great for breeding projects and other things. But for all you guys in the Southern Hemisphere, all those Acapulco Gold hybrids that I made, the Colombian Gold hybrids, the Love Potion, those are all exceptional strains. The Mango Biche blueberries, like there's so many. You can just check our website at scottfamily.farm.
Family.farm.
Yep.
Awesome. And we'll get that I'll share that link up too, dude. I'm super stoked on what you got going on because it's something I think it's something that has been lost. And there is like you said, a lot of people who grow for flower don't necessarily realize that they actually want something out of an inbred line.
Sure.
Like I hear people who will talk about like they want something stable, but they still want like a 4 or 5 phenotypical differential. So you're really talking about like what 1 or 2 generations inbred versus something 13 generations inbred.
Mm-hmm.
Like so you kind of get this mix, and I like to go back and have you kind of clarify the difference between a true F1 is 2 inbred lines to create an F1.
You have two stable homogeneous parents, whether they're polished heirlooms, because obviously a polished heirloom isn't really an inbred line. I guess it is, but on a different level, right?
Yeah.
So you either have two like plants that have been bred to F4, F5 generation of stability, right? You have two F5s that are stable, homogeneous plants that are crossed together in the first generation. That's a true F1. Or you have like my Santa Marta Colombian Gold and Acapulco Gold that are super inbred old heirlooms. And that first generation of those two intersecting is the F1 generation. And in the F1 generation, you'll have a much more aggressive, vigorous growth. And you'll also have a fairly uniform characteristic structurally, terpenes. Usually the F1 generation can be, especially on a true F1, will be very much identical, almost clone-like in a really good one. And it's the F2 generation where you'll get to divide and have some that will look like different parents. That's why when you're inbreeding a line, that F2 generation is like where the real selection criteria comes in more than anywhere else. So if you want to breed it towards the F1 characteristic and the F2 generations where you really want to keep your F1 right there, to gauge against in the F2, right? Because
Right.
the F2 generation also, when you get a great F2 male that's been proven to be characteristic of the F1's original, progeny, then that you can always use as a BX tool on later inbred generations. You
Right.
follow what I'm saying? So when I
Yeah.
get to
Yeah.
an F7 and I'm seeing bottleneck and inbreeding depression, then if I keep that F2 male around, or that even that F2 generation, and I dig, but
Uh,
ideally a male, especially when I'm set up for a breeding program, I can
right.
always go back, but it becomes a juggling act sometimes. That's why on some of the commercial stuff, the big legal farms have done, that's where tissue culture was a real lifesaver, right? I'm
Right.
like, man, that's a proven F2 male. Let's stack that because I'm probably going to inbreed this a whole bunch over the next 5 years, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But that's how. So when you go F5 and then take an F5 and then put an F2 back on it, or an F7, that's really how you reduce bottlenecking in a line.
Got you.
But that F2 generation, when you're inbreeding, is such an important pivotal point in whether the line is going to be representative of what the F1 was like.
Right. Right.
Um, yeah, and this basics of breeding, I find I'm talking about it so much because there's so many people, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but there's so many people polychucking polyhybrids, and it's becoming detrimental to the best interest of the longevity of the cannabis gene pool.
So
We're already seeing this common soup in California. I'm being told about.
yeah.
It's everything's purple and it kind of all smells and looks the same. And also this demand for these ultra high THC profiles it's forcing people to go and hunt certain lines and back cross certain lines, which is why you're getting the common soup, because you have only certain lines that contribute the potential to throw those consistent numbers. I'm talking.
Right.
I've gone through hundreds of plants, and out of those hundreds of plants, I might have 5 that have ever broken a 25. You understand what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is why when the market's demanding a 27, and you have a few lines, a certain cookies, a crescendo, you know what I mean, that a
Mm-hmm.
chem that are hitting those, everybody's going back, and that's when we're getting the cannabis gene pool really kind of,
Muddled up.
contaminated. Yeah, and so it's becoming. I don't even use the word homogenized because,
Well, I was gonna say, at what point does it become where any cross you make is basically inbred because it's all carrying the same kind of genetic characteristics, right?
yeah, except yeah. Yeah, there's nothing worse than popping 15 seeds and getting 12 phenotypes, from my perspective.
Yeah.
Um, some people like that, but for me, I'm a little
And
bit.
right,
Yeah,
you're
I'm
looking for
OCD about my plants, guys.
right. So explain like the polyhybrid process. This is just kind of taking like an F1 and an F1 and crossing those and then crossing those with an F1 and then continuing
Yeah,
kind of this process.
yeah. So I see it stacked all the time. I just teased a friend of mine in Europe because he had this line of, or maybe it was Thailand. He had this line of like 7 strains in a hybrid. It's like this cross that cross this, and I said polyhybrid much,
Yeah, yeah.
basically it's when you're taking an F1 or an F2. Who even knows what you're buying from a lot of these guys? And this is not a sales pitch either. It's just the reality, and it's also, man, the use of uh, STS and reversals. I mean, it's a really good tool, and I do it a lot. And I actually even use fem hybridization, and I use fem for back crossing the recessive traits into a line. Like, I use it, but you gotta investigate the progeny and make sure that you have stability within the lines before you start using reversal tools. And I see all these guys order your STS now.
Yeah.
Like ready to spray, feminizer, right? And I'm like, holy cow, it's only gonna get worse
Yep.
because, yeah, basically what a super polyhybrid is when you take, this plant because it's real good, and you might not know what it is, right? And then you got Buddy's plant down the road. Yeah, that's fucking good. I'm gonna put it on there too. And and then you
Yeah.
get that strain from your buddy, and you're like, your other buddy has it, and that's a super polyhybrid, and that's a lot of what's happening. There's no rhyme or reason to some of the hybrids that are being made. They're just like, yeah, man, it was good, so I put it on it.
Yep.
And I mean, to a certain degree, that was okay at one point, especially for like home growers and stuff.
Yeah.
But what we're starting to see though is we're starting to see a lot of the seeds coming out of like the West Coast, the FEMS,
Uh-huh.
will grow true female, but the first stress induction, they're throwing hermaphrodism.
Oh yeah.
That's the reports I'm getting back, and some of the stuff that we've grown, right? The only hermaphrodites we had on our farm and all those plants that grew were seeds that other people gave us.
Right.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm not even going to get into that, but it's just it's you know what I mean? Like it's just a matter of like certain people who are selling genetics should look at managing genetics with an understanding, of basic, you know, genealogy, because a lot of what's happening, like if you guys knew Neville was my friend, and he actually, if you looked at his work, he followed persistent patterns of how he did things, right? Like C5, A5, and there's like a pattern to the way that he bred. And there is with me too. I do F1, BX1s. You'll see that I follow the same patterns because they've been proven, to work, and they're actually done with some forethought and
Right.
reasoning, and so that I can fixate characteristics. But a lot of the stuff out there is being sold untested, and it's just really it's become the wild west of cannabis genetics for sure.
Yeah. Oh
Um,
yeah. Well, and I think part of that, and it's due to,
There's no regulation.
well, it's not even that. It's due to commercial cannabis and this ability to hype stuff up.
Yeah.
So when people like find a clone only variety and it's being marketed as clone only, and you can sell that cutting for $2,000, and then everybody wants it right out of the dispensary because we've dried it, tested it out at 30%. It hits all the notes. It makes good rosin, blah, blah, blah. So I think the drive for people to find like unfindable unique phenotypes or expressions from cannabis has led to this like mass culture of super polyhybrids where it's, yeah, let's cross this and this and hope to God that we can find one plant that we can grow that'll be just super impressive, from pictures on Instagram to the way it expresses in rosin. Then we will sell a bunch of it and make our money. And I think that's what's part of what's driven that whole market.
what's happening right now is we're seeing a shifting in the value of cannabis and the values of those that grow it, as its commercial value has lowered, and people have been able to grow more plants, without legal detriment in
Yeah.
various places around the world. I've seen that people are more interested in growing stuff that they wouldn't have touched before as well. So with this new home grow culture, and because of legalization, and I think we're seeing um, people strike out of that prohibition model that we talked about,
Yep.
like people that for years were really stuck on pretty cushes,
Yep.
or
Yep.
Yeah.
things that fit in that prohibition, you know model picture of what good cannabis was. I
Yeah.
think that's actually finally changing. And I saw that in Holland as well. When I went and lived in Holland because of problems back around 2005 or so, it was the first time I could grow a plant like Willie Nelson, except for like selling it to certain celebrities and stuff, that wanted those strains from me in Canada, that would pay me big dollars to do that work.
Yeah.
Um, the Dutch was the first place where they would pay me for a top of the line haze or a Willie or something like that, because they had a more educated smoker. But what I'm seeing now in Canada anyway is that you can order ounce of pretty good AAA wheat for $70 delivered to your door, which is around $50 US, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of people aren't growing for money anymore. And so we're seeing a lot of people growing because they like to grow.
Yep.
And so you're seeing a lot of people, you know, growing with total different motivations
Yep.
and total different interests. And so we're seeing a resurgence, a rebirth in the interest of the heirlooms and the type of work that I do. And I didn't time the release of my company around that either. It's just really like interesting because I would have the genetics I'm releasing right now are the same ones I would have released 6 years ago or 8 years ago.
Well,
If
and
I
it's why I wanted to. It's really why I wanted to bring you on because like you said, the homegrown culture is blowing up, and especially a lot of the people I work with, they don't grow to sell it. They grow for the therapy of growing, and there is a lot of this, like especially a lot of the vets I work with have this nostalgia, and kind of this like, ooh, I remember this, and I remember this, and I see so much of the stuff that you're working with has, a lot of that legwork done to it. And like I've got a buddy here who's like, can I get, these beans in Louisiana? And for him that's huge, so I really, really think it's awesome that the home grow culture is starting to go, you know what? I don't really care about a lot of that hype stuff. I want something that's not necessarily old school, but has that what it did,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I feel you, and I just watched Kevin Jodry come here and enjoy the smoke so much, and same with the Marina boys from New York and Florida, and Jodry went back home and he's like, man, all the weed here is so narcotic. I'm not high like it was at your place, man.
Yep. Yep. Oh, dude, you guys look like you were having a blast. I was following you guys on Facebook just because, like, living vicariously through all of you because it looked so much fun, and the flower. It's funny because out here everybody dogs on seeded flower, but
Yeah.
it still looked so good.
Yeah, well, it is what it is, right? And I was kind of insecure about that because normally in my past when I'm preparing for a cup or if I'm gonna see like any of my mentors or anybody, a show, I always had like beautiful dried, cured, jarred up flowers to show off, right?
Right.
And Kevin shows up here, man, and everything's seeded. I got hard fades happening on plants in the field because the seeds aren't striping on me. Like I got indicas that looked like they should have been harvested a month ago, sitting on the field. It was a bit it was a bit humbling, but ultimately when I'm breeding for seed, I'm breeding for seed, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the flowers are kind of secondary to the best interest of the seeds. But it was the first time that I ever like opened up my environment and allowed somebody to come in and I'm like, fuck it, here's what it is, man. You know
That's
what I mean?
the thing. Yeah, but like an experience, somebody experienced, especially like Kevin Jodry, he can sit down and appreciate, like, he's like, okay, I know this is seeded. You can appreciate everything beyond that when you can understand what that's like. Like,
Yeah,
I remember.
but he really loved the smoke too and the flavors.
Yeah.
So that was a big bonus.
Oh, yeah, that's even better, man. When you've got something coming from like seed digging out and you're just like, oh my God. I heard lime being thrown out. I saw the green apple post. Like limes being thrown around like crazy.
Yeah, there's a lot of great flavors. Like the pure love is next level. I forgot how good it was because I always selected that not to sell, but from my head.
Yeah.
So I was selecting, and the Sant, even though it's been line bred, so it was originally a G13 Santa Marta, and I have the Santa Marta right next to it in a bag. But even though I line bred it towards the sativa expression, that tiny bit of G13 airborne way back when changed it, and there's just a different aspect than to it. It's very much like the Colombian, but there's still a sweetness to it that the Colombian has more of a coffee earthiness.
Yeah.
And so even though it's been, many generations inbred, just through selecting based on the palate and that tiny insertion of those indica genetics altered that strain even when it's been selected for multiple generations for sativa expression.
Beautiful.
And so, yeah, I learned a lot through this process because I've never been able to like grow out so many of my cultivars, and
Yeah.
and also at the equator, right, where they're really
Yeah.
expressing, especially the sativas, and really been reflective and looking back on when I initially bred them, and the difference of their expressions under high pressure sodium lighting versus under the sun. There's just been a lot of I've learned a lot about my own work, and also I realized that even though I'm kind of exhausted, that the work really paid off, man. Like
Yeah.
the years of selection really did pay off. Even though my OCD-ness about my plants, like nothing's ever honestly good enough.
Yep. I know
And so
that feeling.
I'm not an easy guy to work with.
Yep. I know
Um,
exactly how that is. I'm told
yeah.
the same thing.
I've gone to my farm so frustrated some days over stuff that is what it is,
Uh-huh.
right? And it's not really bad. It is what it is, man. I get so frustrated that I just leave.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's just funny, and yeah. It's been a really a long road here, but it's really been rewarding. And I probably have 2.5 million seeds or something by the time this project's done, eh?
So are you planning on like continuing this work for, quite a few years where you're
Oh
at?
yeah, this is my life's work, man. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
And
mean, are
my
you
daughter.
planning on staying where you're at for a while?
Oh yeah, so I'm about to go to Thailand and do another project, actually, guys.
Oh, okay.
So this farm will keep going here. My daughter and her boyfriend are here, and my daughter. Well, two of my daughters are here. I'm gonna go. I still have a bunch of work to finish here. Say another 2.5 months or so.
Okay.
And then my oldest daughter's gonna get married again, and they kind of eloped during COVID, so they're having the official wedding.
Yeah.
So I'm going there, and then I'm off to Thailand to do another breeding project in Thailand.
And that'll be kind of a season thing, and then you'll be off to kind of the next. Bro, that's
Yeah.
so sick. That's
Then
so
I'll come
sick.
back. I'll come back here. The kids will keep running this here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just about to do a bunch of fem work right now. Um, Basically, if I'm doing fem work, guys, I have no males on the farm, right?
Yeah.
So I'm about to eliminate all my males. I'm done with them. I'm gonna clean up the veg houses and make sure there's no pollen around. And then we're gonna start to do a little bit of fem work, and just wrap up all the odds and ends. And yeah, and then I'll get out of here. So what we're doing right now though is we're about to start planting all the seeds we just produced and
Yeah.
testing them all, and photographing them all. So, but Garnet and my kids can handle that without me.
I'm excited
So
for seeing
yeah,
those pictures. Oh,
yeah.
it's gonna be epic. So do you do all your fem stuff indoors, or is that still outside too?
I do everything outdoors and indoors, whatever environment I have to work with. As long as I know that I don't have any other cannabis growers around me, I've never had a problem.
Gotcha.
There's some pictures of some fields in Mexico back in 2005, and big breed fields. And those, I believe, were the first that I'm aware of, and some of my Dutch friends were aware of a major feminization project that was done outdoors. And yeah, you guys could find that. You just look for the
Yeah.
pictures of with the donkey getting loaded with sacks and
Yeah,
everything.
yeah, all right.
Yeah, but yeah, so I've been at this for a minute, and yeah, I think that I'll probably be doing this until they put me in the ground.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's epic.
yeah.
Hell yeah.
I don't blame you. I'm down for it too. Shoot.
Well, thank you so much for jumping on with us, Dave, dude. It's been an
Yes, sir.
absolute honor, and I hope we can have you on after your Thai project, dude. That would be awesome to have
Yes,
you
sir.
come back when that's all wrapped up. I'm sure me and you will still stay in contact, and when that's all wrapped up, I'd love to have you back on and talk about that and your experience, between, working in Thailand and working in Jamaica.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the people I'm working with in Thailand are a little more. They have a little more infrastructure than I had in Jamaica. So, yeah, I built this entire farm in Jamaica from raw jungle when I got here.
Yeah.
So I'm actually going to an established farm in Thailand, I think, that has employees, and so it should be a little bit less rough around the edges than this project's been. But we're going to keep plugging away and keep this farm going here, and try to get some better infrastructure over the next year or so.
That's what's up, man.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
All right, guys.
Well, thank you so much again. Much love and always positive vibes, my friend.
Yeah.
Thank
Stay blessed, boys. Okay,
you too,
bye-bye.
brother. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, you guys. That was pretty epic.
That was awesome.
Can we
man.
disconnect?
Yeah, we could take this
Cool.
off now.
All right.
I just got used to it.
So, dude, that was all right. So, again, kind of going back into our intro, I met Dave Scott through Kevin Jodry, basically on like a hunt for something that's going to do good in South Africa.
Yeah.
And when I was introduced to him, he was like still doing some stuff up in Canada, but I think he was just starting this process down to Jamaica. And the list of stuff that, like, when he sent me what he was like working with, I was just like, oh my God. And then kind of following his Facebook profile and talking to Kevin Jodry and kind of going like, man, and even bouncing stuff off of Brother Mendel, I was just like, dude, this guy's legit. I knew who Neville Hayes was, and Skunk Man and all these guys. So it's just really awesome to be able to have that kind of insight on genetics and the world that we're in right now and what we're doing with, where we're at with cannabis genetics in the United States.
Yeah.
And to bring that insight in, and then, to be able to offer that to some of our viewers, like if you guys are into some of that old school stuff, what was it? Scott Family Farms,
Yeah.
scottfamily.farms.
Yeah.
And somebody posted it up in the comments.
Yeah, scottfamily.farm.
Yep. scottfamily.farm. And, yeah, you can get them here in the States. So you can definitely place an order through there. I'm not sure what the process is going to be. I know I'm going to go check some stuff out. I might pick that pink kush up, dude. That pink line. And that's another reason why I wanted to have him in, because we talk to a lot of home growers. We're about home growers.
Yeah.
So to bring somebody in who's like, okay, these are going to do up in that mid-range, all those southern part of the United States, Louisiana, Florida, Texas, those areas, like those are going to be what do well in those areas. So you start looking for those type plants with traits like that. Yeah. So huge just to have him on. So I'm so glad we were able to get our interview stuff working, especially for him, dude. Huge. So, make sure you guys share out this podcast for sure. This episode specific, share it out, because I think information like that is harder to find than you'd think.
Yep.
Because there's not very many people that have really been in the thick of it with that level of plant count for that long.
Yeah. And
that line of credentials of being like, I've done this my whole life all over the world.
Yeah.
On large scale, small scale, like it really is something to be said. So yeah, get that information out to people, because, and that's why I'm hoping to bring him on again, because we just hit the tip of the iceberg that's just what he does.
Yeah.
That's not even going into what he knows completely.
I wanted to get into so much about hash, but I was trying to resist, because we
mean,
could sit here forever talking.
That's
about
what
hash.
I mean, dude. Like and I tell you, when I was in like the martial arts scene, I was wrestling, boxing, all that stuff. one of my coaches, instructors, whatever you want to call them, senseis, said if you want to be really good or the best at something, you have to constantly be around people who are better than you. So in fighting world, it doesn't do me any good to fight people who I can easily beat and overpower. I don't get any better. I only get better when I fight people who are much stronger, much faster, much more agile. Like they have a better ability to me. That's going to force me to step up to my next game. And so when I find guys, especially when they're really easy to talk to and humble, and I know how it is when you're grumpy in the garden and that doesn't really count, but people who are, willing to say, these people help lift me up. I will borderline stalk those people. I mean, that's how I got to know Frenchie. Even Kevin Jodry, I think I bug him a little bit more than I probably should. And I do that because any amount of information that I can get, and I don't even want to say it's life lesson shit. Yeah. Like there's people that have experienced the world and life much differently than you, and you can gain an incredible perspective from them. Mm-hmm. And absolutely, and you'll learn shit about the world and life that you never would have learned if you didn't just like let them say what they have to say.
100%.
And just put yourself, like, as he's talking, I can sit there and be like, dude, putting in that work, being on that farm, like those plants outside, like wind, rain, whatever, nothing ever works out perfect. So there's shit you can't handle. Like you can't do anything about. It is what it is, but you're still like so wrapped up into it. Like I can put myself in that situation and really like just respect the work, dude, because it's
as someone that's worked like a 75-acre farm himself, like I can really respect that myself because like, oh man, that's a lot of work. Going through and like literally hand picking your plants through that is a lot of work. You got to place markers because otherwise you get turned around and you'll be like, oh shoot, was I here or was I in that next row over there? Because they look so similar, but you need to like, it's
gnarly, dude.
It's an entire different ball game that people just don't really realize. And the way he spoke about his work, I could really recognize that he was really playing in the ball field.
Oh yeah, you can tell like when you talk to people, and I've got a really strong like level of discernment. You can talk to people like my bullshit meter goes off really easy.
Yeah.
So when you're talking to somebody and they've been in it and they've seen it, like I'm sorry, when you stare at a field outside on the equator, 10,000 plants, 1,000 plants, 100,000 plants, whatever, and you're sitting at that, sitting on your porch and you're staring at that field, you can't like, unless you've actually done that, you can't describe it properly enough to actually paint the picture.
All right.
Right? And so it's the same thing when you're talking about genetics. Like I can talk about what I know about genetics all day, but until I'm sitting on a field of like 1,000, 10,000 plants and you're looking at stuff specifically, it's not just like throwing these together and running them and then throwing these together. Like there's a calculated approach. Like most people who, and that's why I say most people who breed aren't really, they don't really have the title breeder.
Yeah.
Like, because they're not putting in that level of work. Like you're not seeing that next to itself. It's something that I think gets overlooked because when you're truly creating, and that's why I love what he's doing, because when you're truly creating stuff, say a haze from scratch, and you're like, well, we got to find it in the male because we know it's male, like it's a male thing.
Yeah.
Like that information only comes from large fields.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah,
So,
man. When you see the genetic diversity in a large field in comparison to just like 100, because like I see a lot of people just say like 100, and 100 is a big number, and there's a lot there.
so
Uh,
100, and this is why people say 100. So 100 is a window,
yeah.
right? So if we're sitting in this box, right? And I don't know how many people can see the window that I'm next to right here. But if we're sitting in a box and I lift this banner up, that's the peak of the phenotypical expression that you get. 1,000 plants is everything in the 100,000 plants is everything outside your backyard.
Gotcha.
You can't see what's around here or back there or over there. You can only see through that window. And that's all 100 plants is. So people say like, oh, you can get an idea. But like, imagine peeking through a window in a cabin at the backyard, the whole back mountainside is nothing but cannabis. And you're looking through a square like this. How much are you really seeing?
Yeah.
You're getting an idea.
You're not even getting up and close and smelling them.
No. So it's, yeah. And I'd say even 1,000 plants is like generous. But when you're talking about trying to hunt out expression,
going through fields like that,
dude, the more the merrier. Like now we're talking 10K. I'll give it to you. 100,000. Okay. Now we're looking 1 million plants. We're talking a helicopter and a guy in the field. Hey, I see a weird expression over there in parcel 8. Let's fly out there and send Jamama. You know what I mean? Like that whole thing is a better view. So it kind of like gives you an idea of what work actually takes when you're talking about anything really. Like
it's 100%
nuts, dude.
100%.
Absolutely.
And like seeing everybody talks about mutants and mutations and stuff like that. The stuff that you would see through doing stuff like that through numbers like that, you look at a mutation and not a bad.
Well, and that's what he was talking about when you start noticing bottlenecking expressions. Once you start seeing that, then you start going back into like other. So it was really interesting, and honestly, I couldn't even fathom most of what he was saying, as far as like, what happens when you start seeing the bottleneck, where you're going from the F2 to the BX, and what the BX is. Like, I understand a lot of the terminology, but I understand the process is much different.
Yeah,
and I'm not afraid to admit, at 37 years old, I still have a shit ton to learn. 2 lifetimes, 20 lifetimes ahead of me to really like understand or even get to the point where he's at. Because I'm not working in a field like that. I'm not, you know what I mean? Like in a perfect world, I would be working with him on his farm and then going out to Thailand and working and then working. And then all of a sudden I'd be on another project where he's, coordinating. And that's,
do that shit for free.
I would love to do that for Brother Mendel, to be able to go work projects like that. My life just doesn't fall into that.
Right. Exactly.
You know what I mean? Which I don't have, dude, no regrets on that end. I absolutely love my life. Yeah, but my path to his level of knowledge is much different. And I wouldn't honestly ever be able to achieve that without somebody like him being willing to come on here for an hour and a half and talk about his work.
Well, and then even having the social network to be able to do that too, man. That's pretty awesome.
Well, that's my biggest thing, because I've learned that the only way I'm going to grow what I know in cannabis is by learning from what other people have learned and done, and hands on it myself, so that I can say I've experienced this a little bit on this level, so I have a small understanding of this, and then being able to take that and expand my knowledge in that field, and going down those wormholes, like, and that's what, what made me want to pass along information to other people. But at some point you max out. So how do you max out, like not max out? Well, you're constantly expanding your network. You have to constantly be out there like open-minded, willing to listen to new people so that you can really get into what's going on in in cannabis world right now. Well, I would never know what was going on if I didn't develop a network. Well, I wouldn't have the network I have now if it wasn't only for social media, but the Gangier program. That if it wasn't for the Gangier program, I would have never met Dave.
Yeah.
I would have never been able to openly and comfortably hit Kevin up and be like, "Hey, man," because certain people you can't just like message like they're it's all good. You know what I mean? Like, like what are you gonna hit up Jay-Z and be like, "Hey, could you give me money tips? You give me music tips?" Like you just don't do stuff like that. You only contact certain people if you've been introduced, that type of thing. So like I'm constantly trying to expand that network so that I can find people who are better and smarter than me. Guys like Frenchie Canoli, guys like Kevin Jodry, guys like Dave Scott. I do guys like Neela the Hash Queen, guys like Nika T. Like, I could honestly go on and on and on and on and on and on with the list of people that have influenced me. Kyle Cushman, like,
man, we're going
constantly.
KC CannaFest. We're going to see all kinds of people talking all kinds of knowledge.
And that's the thing. Like, the more I absorb, the more I feel like I need to spread. So, like, whether if I've comprehended anything he said, and it's a home grower wants to know, I can elaborate on that because I know I'm smart enough to. And that's what I was blessed with, is an ability to comprehend shit on a complex level. And dumb it down to teach people who don't necessarily understand that. I have taught people who can barely read how to grow incredible cannabis.
He's talking about me.
Incredible cannabis. Dude, I'm not even kidding. And it's just from an ability, like it's literally come from two things. Listening to the plant and listening to other people and just putting myself in their positions. Where are you at? Plant, what are you feeling? What are you going through right now? And how can I assist that? Same thing with people. And the only way you know that is when you're like, okay, let's get in the ground, bury our feet, and stand there for a day. What's the sun like? What's the wind like? What's the ground like? What's the water like? You know what I mean? 48 hours. See what your plant is really experiencing. I don't mean like literally bury your feet, but put yourself in that environment on a prolonged exposure for a long period of time. And you'll decide really quick if this is comfortable or not. You become really in tune with your plants. It's the same thing with people.
Like if you don't have a fan, air in your house with no fan.
Yeah. Same thing.
What I like to do is clock my zones in my backyard, because what you'll have is like microclimates, and especially in like areas you just need to make sure to like document everything so that you remember it for next year. I think it's super important.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Note taking, learning. Like, and I guarantee you, Dave's got, whether it's a mental thing or he's got a physical notebook, I guarantee you that guy is writing shit down somewhere.
Oh yeah.
Like he's got that where anybody could reference it, right? So say he decided to release all of the notes he has on what he knows about breeding, right? So he could release that as like scientific article type information.
Yeah.
My ability would be able to read that book and break it down on a layman's terms to a point where people can go, "Oh, okay, I get what that is."
Yeah.
Like,
I would love a book like that. I would buy it off the shelves real fast.
Dude,
I'm telling you what.
Yep. There's a lot, like that's the thing. There's a lot of grow Bibles and there's a lot of breeding Bibles, but there's nothing out there that really like gives you an example of like, okay, I did this project and we found this and this is how we found it. Here's one example. Here's two examples. Here's three examples. Here's this. And by the time you're done with the book, you have an understanding of how the process is not an exact process, but you have an understanding of of in depth, like a whole, you know what I mean? It's
Right.
like understanding how to grow cannabis and understanding cannabis. It's a very big thing. You know what I mean? Like anybody could roll a joint, but do you know a plant when like Dave was talking about like, oh, you can see this influence, right?
Yeah.
Do you know cannabis well enough to be able to be like, oh, that's the Afghan in this array of sativa hybrid? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like to be able to be like, oh, okay, so we do have this expression coming through. You only know that if you know cannabis to be like, that's the Afghan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially when you're talking about we took this muddled array of Afghans and then this selected a couple out of here and worked it with a massive amount of sativa. Like all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute. How can you tell? Well, you know those plants on that level.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and sometimes you can depict some of that from just like smoking it, but like nothing compared to what you can depict from growing it, guys.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty big different depiction, and it gets more ingrained into your body because it's like, you know, you're growing it for a long period of time and you get used to it. You get to know the girl.
I'll tell you what, guys, I did this interview and I will be going back and watching this podcast a couple, 2-3 times.
Yeah.
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 We kind of figured that out and then we got it squared away, but all the good stuff came after that. Yeah. No, all the good stuff came after that. Like he talked a lot about it, like a little bit about his haze line and how he kind of got started and a little bit of his past. But all his information stuff came in. The guy's really cool.
Yeah.
He's a really cool guy.
Yeah. I was really excited to have him on the show.
I'm glad we were able to get that shit figured out because huge.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm a little gassed out mentally right now.
Well, he's been getting excited for KC CannaFest himself. He's got to get ready for jumping.
Yeah,
so he's...
okay. So we didn't talk about that at the beginning of the
show. This guy's been dabbing all day.
Holy shit, you guys! I'm in a daze. Like so, KC CannaFest. We're picking up the rental car tomorrow. We're leaving in a day. So day after tomorrow, we're going to KC CannaFest.
See you there.
And I have to make sure I'm ready for the rosin bowl and the essence of judging, just meaning that I call it warming up. I do it anytime I'm going to judge. If I'm judging flower, I'm spending a lot of time smoking a lot of different kinds of flower. Good flower, bad flower, mediocre flower. I'm looking at stuff and going, yeah, there's no way I'm smoking that. Like I'm exposing myself to a lot just to calibrate and build my palate and make sure. It's just like, dude, if it's really funny because I make a lot of fight analogies because I used to be a fighter. So it's no different than if I was getting ready for a fight, me going to the gym for 8 hours every day and putting in work right before the event. You know what I mean? So you do that for a good 3, 4, 6 weeks. You're constantly training, but you put in hard right before you go in. So it's the same thing. And it's just to make sure that everything's on point. You know, if I'm having sinus issues, can I still, can I still work through stuff like that? Do I have all the tools I need? You know what I mean? Like I know for a fact when I do a bunch of dabs in a row, I get that resin because here's the thing. I will smell and taste through my nose. So I do a lot of inhale, exhale through my nose and mouth at the same time while I'm smoking, like dry hitting. There's a lot involved in that going on right here.
Right.
When I do that with rosin, because of the nature of the smoke, I get a lot of resin pack on my sinuses. And it gets sticky to a point where it feels like my sinuses are plugged, but they're just stuck. The walls are just stuck. So I can't like breathe until I like, and then they start opening back up. If I pinch it, they just stick back shut again. So it's David and I were trying to talk about that. He says like certain teas work really good. So we're looking into that. I'm gonna tomorrow, same thing, bunch of dabs and stuff like that. Well, you can't really pump that while you're judging. So that's the thing. That's the thing. A specific type of hot tea, the steam helps, and then the floral aroma of that can help loosen. I'm thinking like a nasal spray type thing too. I'm also thinking so today we did 14
I'll give you something.
We did 14 different types of rosin. So we had 5 that were pressed from flower in different like grades. So we did all 5 of those, and then we had 3 from 14er, which is a commercial rosin facility here, I think in Colorado. And then we had 4 from Eden Supernatural Garden. And we hit all of those like back to back to back, and took about a 5-10 minute break after we did all the 14ers. So we did those after the flower, and then we took a little chill break, and then we came back and did the 4 Eden bat. So that's just to like, okay, palate, how much can you take before you numb out? I numbed out at about 12, where I was like, the last 2, I told David, I was like, the last 2 I want to come back to. He's like, why? I was like, because we did one from Eden that was the Chili Verde breath, and everything after that was just Chili Verde breath. Like that funky gas. Like I could still taste them, but I couldn't tell if it was the Chili Verde influencing or if that was just part of it. And it was literally like Tropicana cookies.
Gotcha.
So I'm like picking up stuff I know wasn't in there. So I'm like, okay, that doesn't count. So I have to recognize when that happens and be able to counteract it. I didn't go do any coffee smelling. I was drinking water, but stuff like that to clear my palate out. But we were doing it really close together. I think the amount of entries that we have is like 20 something. So we'll be and we have like almost a whole day, I think. So I think it'll be spread out a little bit more, that we won't be like, okay, wipe it, clean it, chill it, talk about it a minute, come back in for the next one, wipe it, clean it. Like we literally, it was 14 dabs back to back to back to back to back. Don't come in. 3 hours. No, 2.5 hours. We actually talked about that. It was a 2.5 hour thing from start to finish with our break.
Up and on these dabs, man. Ooh.
I think if I was able to take a break in between then and like do things, step outside, get some fresh air, hit some tea or coffee, something to clear my palate, even something strong, like not necessarily mint, but even like a ginger or something,
sure.
Something to like help clear. So even if it's hot steam, just kind of breathe over hot steam to help kind of clear out some of the sinuses and let those terpenes break down and be able to move out. Like that's what I'm going to figure out tomorrow before the show, basically. Like it's going to be just more dabs because here's the thing. I prefer flower. I can evaluate rosin really well. I can evaluate concentrates really well. I really enjoy flower. So I have to build my tolerance to evaluating rosin when I'm talking 20 different samples. Because it's not going to be one and done on these. I'm probably going to be doing anywhere from 40 to 60 dabs in a day.
Yeah.
It'll be, it'll be worth it. It'll be worth it. So it takes a little bit of warming up. We're going to warm up. Next couple of days are warming up. And come the 14th, 15th, it'll be on like Donkey Kong. And I'm hoping that the lower elevation doesn't, I think that's going to help me.
Hopefully it doesn't have the adverse effect.
It could, dude. When I went to California and I was thinking the same thing. Woo! Some of the shit I was smoking on out there had me backwards, but it was, I don't know, man.
Well, sometimes being in a different environment definitely changes your high, like you've always said.
Yeah, setting
Yeah,
have a huge influence.
definitely.
So
Could be the vibe.
dude, we'll see. So tomorrow, I think we're gonna talk about hash. I did see Glenn. I don't know if he's still in here. He was asking. Yes, Glenn wanted me to talk about Piatella hash.
Do a dab off. Oh yeah, dude, that looked dope.
Have you heard about that?
I looked it up when you
looked it up and I posted that.
I can't wait.
All right, so
It looks dank.
okay, so I don't want to say I know I could like teach how to make it, but I understand what it is, and I understand I believe I could, with enough dry sift, I could get there.
Yeah,
I think so.
nice.
I think so. With proper water sift from fresh frozen. That's the key. So what you saw looked like rosin. And if you do proper water sift, you can get there. I think you could get there with like static sift, but it's really like when you do fresh frozen, really 6-star type stuff, and it's a cold cure process. There's no heat and pressure involved. It's not rosin, but it's a cold cure process. And I'm almost positive I understand what it is, just in the sense that I get how you could get to that point, because I've had 6-star heads at room temperature melt into what looks like rosin, and you can dab it. So if you get it to melt at room temperature and then you start whipping and cold curing, you can create what is Piatella. We'll go more into that though tomorrow. And we'll dab a lot. We're going to dab a shit ton tomorrow.
I'm sorry, I'm not bringing any shirts to KC, guys. I'm sorry. I don't have any shirts right now available, but I am bringing a ton of different stickers.
No, he's coming here.
Oh, over here?
That's Jimmy. He's coming here.
Oh, yeah.
In
Well,
July.
try to figure out if we could get one by then, but
Probably not. I'll give you mine, Jimmy. You won't wear it. You won't fit.
Yeah, he won't fit. He won't fit in any of us.
But I'll give you a shit ton of stickers, bro. Don't worry.
yeah, we'll get it figured out.
All right, guys. I think we should call it a show. I'm beat, and that was solid. I don't know really how we could say much more and top what we had. I'm fucking high too, so if you...
I'm super stoned too, man. Well, I'm super excited for KC CannaFest, man. I just think we just need to mentally prep for that. And,
I'm ready for that shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
You might have some prepping to do.
I got some prepping to do, man. I got some stuff I need to get ready and some stuff I need to line up. So
I smoke weed for a living. That shit's what I do. I grow weed and smoke weed for a living.
I'm ready to smoke down. I ain't saying nothing about that. I just need to get me some food. I'm ready to roll. You know what I mean? I can't roll there with no food.
Nope.
You gotta feel the tank.
Yeah. All right, guys. We'll catch you tomorrow night, and then we're out for KC CannaFest. Much love, y'all.
Take it easy.
We can all agree weed should taste good. Let the world know what's on your mind with all the Weed Should Taste Good apparel from weedshouldtastegood.com. With hats, shirts, hoodies, and all sorts of awesome gear to fit your style, Weed Should Taste Good also has a list of seeds you can grow your own great tasting weed. Visit weedshouldtastegood.com.